what I'd like to ask you to do is, let's go through what you did for the Saints. And obviously, it's fluid and there's trades, but it kind of gives you a sense of players and positions that the Saints might be looking at. So let's run through that here in this first segment if we could. First round at 24, you have Patrick Queen on the board, and the Saints pulling the trigger there. If it comes, let me ask it to you this way, Mike. If it comes down to Kenneth Murray or Queen, if they're both on the board, which guy do you think the Saints would pull the trigger on?
Well, I have Murray a higher-rated player. I don't know how the Saints have it rated, but I mean it's fairly close between Murray and Queen. So it would just which player Sean likes best. I mean, I'm just telling you the truth. That's what it's going to come down to. But I have Murray ranked a little higher player, a little bit more experience at the position. He is a little bit more physical player, and again, a lot of them. There's some similarities between the two, but because Queen is quicker, faster, I think he's a better cover guy. He's been put in more man situations. When you look at Murray, he's played in the coverage part of the game, but they didn't ask him to do a lot of man. He was in a lot of zone concepts. So there's good and negative, and you see it across the board with both of them. The thing that jumps out at me about Queen is that it is different to play weak side linebacker and inside linebacker. You look at the field, the way you basically kind of hit the hole or to find the ball carrier. It's much different to attack the ball carrier from outside than inside. And how quickly he picked that up. I thought that was the one thing that jumped out at me. Now, Murray's done it a little bit longer, and he's got sort of a tap-tap step. And then he gets up the field. That's a habit you're not going to break him of. That's just the way he is, and you don't try to break that, because my neighbor Joe Clark, he coached Kurt Warner in NFL Europe, and it drove him crazy. When Warner would take the snap, he'd flip the ball. Every snap, he'd flip it.
Like spin it in his hands, you mean?
Spin it in his hands.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so the Saints are playing the Rams one year, and I'm talking to Jim Hazelate. And I tell Jim, I said, it was crazy. I said about Warner is that he flips the ball every time he takes the snap. And he told me, he said, we just sort of picked that up. And he said, what's crazy about it, he does it every snap, and it never affects him. You never see him drop the ball or fumble with it, but it's just a habit. If you watch Joe Namath throw the football, he'd pat it. Almost like a baby, you pat the back, after eating or drinking milk or whatever, and he'd pat the ball and then he'd throw it. It didn't affect anything. So if you try to mess with that, that's not a good thing. Let them be. That's what they've done all their life. Both are really good football players. I'm hoping one of the two is there because I do think when you look at this roster and you're looking at immediate need, that's the one area that jumps out at you because of the injury factor with Alex Anzalone, with Kiko Alonso. You know what you have with Demario Davis. And for both Queen and Murray, I don't have to take them off the field. And the thing about it is, I think there's a really good working relationship between Sean Payton and Ed Orgeron. I think that, and Ed's pretty honest about, he's really honest about telling you about a player. And I think that's a good situation that they have between the two of them. He was on Sean's staff. If Ed speaks about somebody, Sean's going to listen. He knows Ed's a straight shooter about that. So I did a couple of them. One, I had Murray there. The other one, I had Queen there. But I had to make a choice.
Right.
So I went with Patrick Queen.
Mike, it's no second-round pick for the Saints. I think the linebacker, the need there is very obvious for the Saints. No second-round pick. In round 3, you have the Saints going receiver. And Lynn Bowden from Kentucky, who's a fascinating prospect. How would you see Bowden fitting in to the Saints offense if he is there in round 3 for him?
He's a young Emmanuel Sanders.
Okay.
I think he was he's one of the most intriguing offensive players in this draft class because of what he did. He was a quarterback, a wildcat quarterback, played wide receiver, out wide, in the slot. A jet sweep halfback, return punts and kicks.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing that cat didn't do was sell popcorn, peanuts, and Coca-Cola out in the stands and beer out in the stands. I mean, he did all of that for Kentucky. And here's the thing about it. Last year, he had played wide receiver as a sophomore. But for the betterment of the team, not because of his draft status, but for the betterment of the team, he said, okay, I'll go back and play quarterback. He sacrificed basically sort of what was going to be his thing in the NFL. He was going to be a receiver. That's his spot, to play quarterback to help Kentucky win. When you watch Kentucky, just how good Lynn was. I mean, no matter what. I mean, Lynn was a heck of a football player. He is super quick. You never get a good shot at him. His open field running skills are outstanding. Man, I think about him in this offense and how creative Sean could be with him in a lot of different ways. As that jet sweep guy, as a slot receiver, out wide. And let me say this, I would not be shocked. In fact, if I had money, I would maybe bet on it. I think there's a pick between that first-round pick and where they pick in round 3.
You think the Saints are going to move into round 2?
I think the Saints kind of jump back in it a little bit into that. And so I could get that part of it. The toughest part was when I did it and seeing that Lynn and Amik Robertson there, and so I do know that slot cover corner, which would fit Amik to the T. And I know one thing, when Amik goes on the field for the first time, he's going to be your slot guy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's that good of a football player. And you'll get to talk to him a little bit later on. But it came down to Bowden, Lynn Bowden, and it came down to Amik Robertson. It came down to both those guys for me in round 3. I think both would fill needs. Both are very versatile players. But Lynn, as an offensive player, okay, Sean used that first-round pick on a defense. Man, he's itching to get an offensive player.
Right.
Come on. And so Lynn would fit that extremely well. I think he fits that very, very well. And he's a little bit rough around the edges as a route runner, and you can understand it because of all the other positions that he's played. But, man, when he's going to get it, he's going to get it.
Mike, last one here in this first segment, and we'll talk some NFL win totals that Caesars put out. We'll get to that here in the next segment. We'll get some LSU guys as well. But you also got the Saints going offensive line in round 4, Solomon Kindley from Georgia, especially after just giving Pete the big deal. What's the thinking there going interior line?
I think if you're looking for a veteran player that maybe they move, I think Larry Wolford might be that guy.
This offseason?
This offseason.
Okay.
Again, there is a reason, and I do listen well, and I heard Sean talk about this is a good interior draft. Okay, he just used a second-round pick on Eric McCoy. They just spent a bunch of money on Andrus Peat. Well, even I can figure it out. It's got to be at the other guard position, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, come on.
Sure.
We're not splitting the atom here. We're not going in front of the Supreme Court with a case. He's telling you, without telling you, that that's an area he's looking for, and he said it. It's a really good area for interior linemen. We're going to keep our eyes on that. You look at Solomon; he's a big road grader. I mean, he's a guy that's got a wide load, and man, he is a terrific run blocker. He has gotten much better as a pass protector. He's a pure guard, which is going to push him into the middle rounds. But I like what he's done out on the football field to lead the way, can get to the second level to throw a block. And I think that in this draft, with a lot of receivers, I think tackles and defensive linemen normally come off the board pretty quickly, along with cover corners. The value is going to be at that interior position, center, guard. Also, I think defensive tackles in that spot. But we're talking about the Saints, so it would be at the guard position. And I think Kindley would be a good pickup for the Saints.
I wanted to get your thoughts on Caesar's projected win totals that they put out today for the NFL teams. And might as well just start with the Saints that they have. Really, they got Ravens Chiefs at 12, and then Saints Niners with the highest win total among the NFC teams at 10.5. Anything right there in that top jump out at you?
No, I'll take the Saints in the over. I'll take the 49ers in the over at 10.5. You know, I mean, all I know is that 49er team is pretty doggone good. Man, I do know they lost Buckner and Sanders, but they got 2 first-round picks, and they did a pretty good job. Man, that defense is really good, really, really good. And they need a few more weapons to help Garoppolo and help up front. I know Lynch has talked about, he's got a couple guys up in age along that offensive line. He'd like to get some younger players in there, but I'll go to the over on that. I think the Ravens, Kansas City's about right.
Mike, the other one that I think everybody was going to look at was going to be Tampa and New England, the Brady effect, right? So Tampa, they peg at 9. New England,
I'm going over.
What, New England 8.5. And the interesting thing about New England, this is the first time since 2003 they don't have the highest projected win total in their division. But so let's start with Tampa. So you say over 9. Why?
2 words, Tom Brady.
But
okay, what there was 7-win team
7,
last year?
Yeah. So So you're saying he's worth more than 2 wins?
He's worth 3. To me, he's worth 3 wins.
Okay.
You look over Winston, and he was a turnover machine last year for him. And I just think Brady's not going to turn that ball over nearly as much as what Winston has done. And I think they're contenders. I don't think they'll overtake the Saints in the NFC South, but I think they're a playoff team. No doubt about it in my mind. They're a double-digit 10-win team.
Especially with an expanded playoff. It's hard to imagine if you get to 9 that you're not going to be in if they go over for sure. And what about New England at 8.5? Like, who ends up being the quarterback for New England this year?
I think it's the former Auburn quarterback.
Stidham?
I really do.
You don't think that they draft a guy this year?
Or
go free agency?
I think it's Jarrett Stidham. I think that's who Belichick wants in that spot. And, again, he's got some other options if he wants to go with a veteran, but he hasn't played that card down yet. I think the thing with New England is, can they fill the holes on defense? When you see all the people that they lost on the defensive side of football, especially in that front 7, man, that's a lot of losses that they had. They couldn't come up with the money to do it. And where's the big receiver? Where's the tight end? You know, so I know they have a lot of picks every year.
Mm-hmm.
It's something Bill likes to do. He accumulates picks. And, and talking to Rick Venturi about it, Rick had been in a war room with him when he was with Cleveland. And they still sort of consult with one another about certain players. And he's telling me, it's all Bill. Bill's mine. And he hasn't been the greatest draft selector. I think where Bill excels is taking a veteran player and putting him in his scheme, and it all works. But who takes the place of Danny Shelton and Jamie Collins, up front? You think about all those guys they've lost, and they didn't have a weapon offensively. Now, can he all come through for him at wide receiver? I don't know. He was hurt most of last year. They don't have a tight end that can stretch the field. Now, Bill's the greatest coach of our lifetime professionally. I don't think there's any debate of that. But, man, if he could get double digits with that roster, you can start carving that facial feature out on Mount Rushmore of the NFL for him. And he would do it without Brady.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I think they're an 8-win, 9, maybe squeeze a 9th win out somewhere. But I think that 8.5 is really close to where I think you're going to see the Patriots kind of land. And this is the year. If Buffalo is going to do it, now's the year to overtake the Patriots.
Mm-hmm.
You look at that Bills roster, really good on the defensive side of football. Now you've added Stephon Diggs to the lineup. How much better Josh Allen can get remains to be seen. But, man, they pose you a lot of problems because of how well they play on defense. I think they've drafted very well. And this is the year. If Buffalo's going to overtake them, it's now.
Mike, let's look at the other two teams in the NFC South. Let's start with Atlanta, who they've got pegged at 7.5. Caesars does. And Mike, we were talking about this in hour one. From 28-3 in the Super Bowl, it has just all been downhill for Atlanta. What has happened there?
Just 2 years ago was injuries. They were ravaged by injuries. I mean, in numerous places. And that part you could get because remember the year afterwards, they lost to the Eagles in one of the playoff games where you throw a better pass to Julio Jones, you might have won that game against the Eagles. Because remember, they were driving late.
Mm-hmm.
And, Matt Sales won over Julio. But since then, it's really been sort of the disaster of what happened with injuries. And then all of a sudden last year, it became a train wreck. I don't know that just a few little changes here and there are going to make a difference. I think they're an 8-8 football team, and I think that's pretty much where they're going to stay. I don't see all of a sudden this snapping loose and that this team is going to make a run for it all again. I think they've lost a little bit. Hank Stram told me this one time about it was the longest game ever. They lost to the Dolphins in a double overtime game. And Jan Stenerud was the greatest kicker of that era. He misses 2 field goals that Jan would have never missed.
Mm-hmm.
And then Garro ends up winning it for the Dolphins on a field goal. And he said, Mike, from that moment on, we were never the same. He said, for whatever reason, the heart out of us, out of a football team. And he said, we had gotten a little bit older in age, but he said it sort of ripped the heart out of us. And I look at the Falcons. I don't know that the Super Bowl thing ripped it out. But then the next year when you got a chance to do it, to get back, you missed out again. And then people start questioning the coaches and the coaching staff and everything else. And there's a lot of finger-pointing going on in Atlanta right now, a lot, about what's happening to this team, what's going on here. And now the big part is defending not only Breeze twice a year, Brady twice a year.
Yeah.
So, and I wonder, Matt, I think into what's in the minds of the Saints or Atlanta or Carolina. Does Tom Brady impact what they're going to do early in this draft? Okay, we got to play him twice a year. And thinking about that guy, and we're going to have to go against him another year because it looks as though he'll play 2 more years. We're going to have to defend him against those receivers and those tight ends. I think it'll have an effect on how you pick.
It's interesting. And they're also going to wear hideous uniforms so we can laugh at them as they lose. And let me ask you about Carolina. Mike, you've said it on this show, and I'm sure everywhere else. You've said it as a flat-out rebuild in Carolina, and Vegas has them pegged at Caesars has them pegged at 5.5. Your thoughts on Matt Rule and Teddy B and a really expensive Christian McCaffrey?
Yeah, again, I would go to over. I think they win 6 games.
Okay.
But this is a rebuilding team. They don't want to tell you that. I mean, that's the dirtiest word in the English language, sports-wise, the R word, rebuild.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to say it, but you see it happening in front of your eyes in Carolina. And now you're in a division where you play Matt Ryan twice a year, Brady twice a year, Breeze twice a year. And how quickly will all this come together for Matt Rule? And I thought he did a fabulous job, certainly in college, and rebuilding not one program but 2.
Sure.
I mean, and then listen, that's not the easiest thing in the world in what he was doing, but it took him a little while, and I think it'll certainly take him some time in Carolina. My concerns with Carolina is on the defensive side of the football, front 7, and you can say next man up. Tell me who's in that next man for Luke Kuechly.
Yeah, amen.
Okay, it's different. Come on. Common sense tells you that guy was one of the elite players in his game. It's not going to be that easy to fill that void that he left. And now they've gotten some age up front along the defensive line. It exposes your secondary a little bit more than what you'd like. McCaffrey's a heck of a football player. I mean, he really is. And I think DJ Moore's a really good player. The offensive line is being rebuilt. Don't have Greg Olsen at tight end. You're going to struggle. You're going to struggle.
Mike, let's take a look at what you've got projected for some of the LSU guys here in the M&D draft report. And most notably, I think everyone's going to look at how many guys you have going in round one. And you've got 5, which would be an LSU record. The one that is not is the guy I want to talk about first, and that's Grant Delpit. Ultimately, Mike, for a guy that came into this last season as a projected top 10 pick, why in round 2, and what might it take? What's the scenario that might unfold for Delpit to get into round 1?
He was one of the toughest guys for me to project because you were hearing both sides. Not where I project him, because I think he's a first-round pick guy. But I'm picking of where I think he'll go.
Mm-hmm.
And he could go late in round 1. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But I think there'll be a little bit more conservative run with this, where, okay, if a guy's got an injury issue, we didn't see him run at the combine. The video stuff, to me, it's like if you get sick and they give you chicken soup, okay? It's more mental than anything else. It doesn't help you one way or another. But I think the part about it is, which one am I getting? The 2018 Delpit, who was arguably one of the top 3 defensive players in college football, or the guy last year that was missing open field tackles. You could see he could not break down to make a tackle because of the ankle injury, and then he had the shoulder injury. And in the national championship game, he has a hamstring issue. Okay, where do you lead here? I'm going to have a strong scout stand up and tell my coach, listen, did you watch the 2018 film on Grant Delpit? Because a lot of these coaches, you and I had to talk off the air about it. We don't talk normally about what we do in the show, but one of the things is that coaches and scouts look at things differently, totally. That scout who has been on that field and talked to the head coach and the assistant coach and the trainer and the strength coach and players that he's played against and with, they know a lot about him, and they slip him the intel. You know what that coach looks like? He can say what he wants. He's been watching film of veteran players. Now he's watching some film. How much does he break down every game of every player? He's watching some of it. He's not watching all of it. It's not. So he's looking for the measurables here. How did that guy play here? How does he look? Or what happened here? You're going to have a strong scout stand up and say, you know what, that Grant Delpit, he should have been in round 1. Let's take him now. There's no way he should be here at 28, 29. Let's pick him. How many guys have that stroke? Most of the time it's the head coach. And we even heard Sean sort of jokingly say yesterday, but I think not jokingly, say, man, I sort of enjoy this process. I don't have scouts in my ear. You pick that up? You picked that up? So I did. And he might have been half joking, but it was a lot more than half, put it to you that way. And coaches fall in love with the look-sees of a player. They fall in love with what they see last. What did you see? Okay, Delpit didn't run.
Mm-hmm.
He had a difficult 2019 season where he wasn't as rangy. He did miss tackles. Not trying to sugarcoat it for it, but that's actuality. For me, I wouldn't have an issue picking Grant in round 1. I wouldn't. I know how Coach Ogeron felt about him and the latitude he gave him. And if he's healthy, it's easy for that pick. But I think for some teams, they may not have that strong-willed guy to go up against and tell an Andy Reid or a Bill Belichick or a Sean Payton or whoever, is picking late. Man, Grant Delpit is much better than that guy you want to pick. Okay? They may have a few like that in this league, but not a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So that's gonna be the debate between Delpit. Which one are you getting? And you understand the injury part, and coaches understand it, but their memory is what I saw last.
Mike, you did have 5 former Tigers go in round 1, which would be a record. Obviously, it would break the record from the '07 draft when 4 went. The one at the top is obvious with Burrow. Any of the other ones kind of vex you a little bit that you had to think long and hard about?
Caleb Vaughn, no. Jefferson, no. Queen, no. For me, Fulton, I think in a league that you've now got to start matching up. And Matt, I think one of the things when you look at this draft class is we're going to look back maybe 4 years from now, 5 years from now, is the impact of the receivers, of this huge class of receivers. Matt, go through it and look at the size of these guys.
Yeah.
I mean, all these 6'2", 6'3", 6'4" wideouts. Okay? Man, how are we going to match up against those guys? And it's not all about throwing the deep ball. Man, I want to see the quarterback throw the deep ball. You know what it is? I throw an 8-9 yard hitch pass, and that guy breaks away from a cornerback, you know, a 6'4", 230-pound receiver, and he takes off downfield. Okay? That 5'10" or 5'11", 195-pound corner. Yeah, he might make that tackle, but most of the time, it's a lot of Ole moves to try to get in his way more than, or get out of his way than anything else. But you look at a Michael Pittman Jr. or a Chase Claypool and Antonio Gandy, Golden, all these huge wideouts, it's going to change this league. And it's not all about throwing the ball 50 yards downfield. It's about you better have people that can tackle as a corner. And it's going to be interesting because everybody's got a little different view of the third, fourth, fifth, sixth corner. The first two guys are cut above. C.J. Henderson, no question, they're going to be the number 2 corner. It's going to be what happens afterwards with a Kristian Fulton, with a developing Trevon Diggs, who really came into Alabama as a wideout, like his brother, and is still learning the position. Jalen Johnson from Utah, who is more of a press cover corner than off. That's when he's been getting beat, when he's in off coverage. Jeff Gladney is a 5'10" corner. And I thought he did a really good job. You watch him go up against CeeDee Lamb, he probably covered CeeDee Lamb better than anyone out there. But he's 5'10".
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so he's going to get downgraded because of his lack of great size. And so we can kind of go on. There is a great debate amongst people, from what I gather, in a lot of rooms about who's the third and the fourth and the fifth cornerback in this draft class. But I look at Fulton. He's played a lot of man coverage. He was suspended for over a year, and he comes back in, and he walks in at LSU. He's the starter.
Mm-hmm.
He just walks in. Okay, I got it. And I remember Coach O telling me Kristian Fulton's one of the 5 best players on the team. I said, on defense? He said, no, on the team. This is before he got put back on the squad. So it goes to show the respect that you had for him. And everybody gets picked on today. There is no Deion Sanders in this world. Everybody's going to get picked on from time to time. And some teams went after Stingley a little bit. Some teams went after Fulton a little bit. And a lot of teams went after the nickel. They went after Kerry Vincent quite a bit. And so that part you kind of gather. But, man, I like Kristian Fulton a lot. You can't teach ball skills. He's got it. He's a ball hawk, and he doesn't let one bad play affect the next. I think that amnesia part of his game is paramount for a quarterback, or a cornerback, I should say.
Let's get to this one from Anthony, who emailed me there earlier this morning and said, hey, Matt, can you ask Mike about Emmanuel Butler? If his name ever comes up, he was exciting in camp last year, and I'd love to see him fill the wide receiver void. Seems like the perfect fit. What do you think the prospects are for Butler this year with the Saints, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, he really played well in the practice sessions. Struggled his first game. He let one right through his hands. But then, I think that was a little bit of nerves, and he got better with it. I know the coaching staff likes him a lot. They also like little Jordan Humphreys quite a bit, too. So, again, you got a situation, 2 receivers very similar, and 2 huge receivers, target receivers. And it's something Sean likes in a receiver. He loves that size. So I think Butler's a guy that they like quite a bit, and hopefully he's able to turn it up. But they like him and Humphreys. Humphreys was the guy that made the 53-man squad over Emmanuel.
Yep.
Now, not a lot of people thought that way when you were watching him, in practice, because every day it seemed as though Butler was making one big catch after another.
Here's a tweet from Brian Millisey, who said, ask Mike. He says he's gotten your guide every year since 99. He said, you have the Saints selecting Lynn Bowden from Kentucky over Devin Duvernay from Texas. How do you differentiate those two, Mike?
Man, that was tough, too, because I'm a big Devin Duvernay fan. He reminds me so much of Devery Henderson. He's a little bit of he's got a lot of the same features. Devin he played running back. He was the Texas 5A state champion in the 100, 200 meter dash, which means one thing: they got fast dudes in Texas.
Yep.
And he's the fastest one of the ones. Man, that's unreal. He's a little bit of a work in progress, and when you see him as a receiver, a lot of it is setup plays. It's sort of the same play over and over and over again. His route tree would have to be expanded. I'd have no issue with Devin Duvernay. I think he's a guy that's very, very similar to Devery.
Interesting.
Now, remember, Devery didn't hit the NFL with a big splash either. It took him a little while, and then, man, he became certainly a big play element for this Saints football team. So I like both of them. I had to make a choice, and so I went with Lynn.
Here's one on Twitter. Ask Mike DC Coach O pursuing former 5-star quarterback JT Daniels from USC. He announced today he's entering the transfer portal.
Man, it would certainly I would look at that strongly. I was with JT. He came to the Manning camp. Man, listen, he was one of those guys where Jordan Love and Burrow and Herbert got so much attention. And Archie Manning and I watched JT throw it. Man, he can hum it. He can throw it. Again, I think there'll be a long line of people after JT. He's a very talented guy. You can see physically he's got it. Also, too, he left school early to go to USC. He's still a very young football player. And so, I wouldn't be surprised.
Charlie on Twitter asked Mike, highest-rated non-LSU Louisiana player in the draft. Mike, I think you're going to surprise some people because most are going to assume it's the guy who's going to talk to us in 8 minutes, Amik Robertson, but you actually have somebody rated higher.
Robert Hunt, University of Louisiana. He's my top-rate guard. I've got him as a second-round pick. Jim Nagy and I were talking about this from the Senior Bowl, and he told me, man, Mike, you were right, man. Robert Hunt can play. He got invited to the Senior Bowl, but he had a groin injury. He didn't play late for the Raging Cajuns, and then he couldn't play in the Senior Bowl. This is Nagy's interpretation, and I think he might be right. Had he went to the Senior Bowl, had a strong week of work, we might be looking at him as a first-round pick. He is a dominating guy in the middle as a guard. He's a big man who can move, terrific run blocker. He needs a little bit of work as a pass protector, like most college linemen do. But, man, he's a stud football player, a 2-star recruit coming out of high school.
Amazing.
And he'll be a second-round pick.
Cody Efferson on the Facebook live chat said, Mike, since Bridgewater is gone, what's going to be the deal with Taysom Hill and what'll play other than backup? What's going to happen there at quarterback for the Saints?
It'll be interesting, and I think, Sean has always been the sort of guy that options, that's what he loves. He loves the options part. When you look at it, to me, it would almost seem as though if the right college quarterback was there, I think he would pick him. Now, I can't get in his head. But if not, then I think he would try to bring in a veteran for a one-year deal. And you can sell that to a veteran player. Come in here. Look what happened with Teddy in those games that he got to play. And look what it did financially for him. And also, the thought in the back of a veteran's mind, they know this Drew Brees is last year.
Mm-hmm.
That I might be, man, I got to go up against Taysom Hill? Tag me. I'm ready to go in. I'll go up against Taysom. I can't compete against Drew, but I can go up against Taysom. That might be an advantageous spot for a veteran if the Saints don't pick a quarterback come in those 3 days of the draft. But I do know Sean, he likes certain people in the draft. There's always a couple of quarterbacks that he likes, but it would have to be in the right spot.
Mike, got less than a minute. Ashari asked, do the Saints get a tight end, and is safety or corner a look?
Oh, I think corner is definitely a spot that they're going to take a long look at. I don't have any doubt about it. Tight end, if this isn't a great year for tight ends, but I wouldn't be surprised they pick one late. I think running back might be an issue later in the draft. I could see that happening, especially a guy who can do sort of the same things Alvin Kamara could do. Because if something would happen to Alvin, I could put that guy in. I don't have to change up what I do.